to the deeper dive. Glad to be back with you. Glad to have you with us. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope it was better than mine. As an Eagles fan, it was kind of difficult. But what are you going to do? We got to watch football well into January. Shit happens. We move on. And now we have to talk about Nick Foles, Carson Wentz controversy all throughout the winter. Not looking forward to it. But anyway, Adam, glad to be back with you, man. I heard that you were in the Uber the other day, and something came on that you were familiar with.
Yeah, you and Manny's Serious show came on. It was it was interesting. I'm sitting there not really paying attention, and then I just hear you guys. I was like, oh shit, I know them.
Now, dude, the Uber driver just have that channel on?
Yeah, he'd been flipping around between, because it was during the Colts Chiefs game. He'd been flipping around between like different talk, like sports talk stuff, and then he flipped over to that channel like probably, I don't know, 5 minutes before you guys came on.
And then Manny had a certain take, and you were like, "Wait, I don't know these guys."
Yeah, he didn't say it in the car. I just found out through Twitter that he liked Jared Goff. So
yeah, and I mean they did score like 30 some points. It was just C.J. Anderson. Seth hates me. He goes, Laffy is depressed. My day is now enjoyable. I mean, all he wants to see is me miserable. That's all right. I'm happy. We're doing good today. We got 6 games, Adam, and the news I saw you said, I hope Laffy started the deep dive late today. The article that you and I switch off Monday or every day of the week. I did start late today, and you said this after the Capella news. The reason is, though, I've been starting it late every day because there's really no value in getting an early start when not everything, but 3 pieces of news, 1 or 2 big pieces of news can change the entire landscape of the slate.
Yeah, exactly. Then you just end up with an article that's been up all day and is useless by 2:00. So
right.
Yeah, no, I'm there with you, because you either end up getting it up before the news and then it's not worth it for people, or you end up just having to go back and rewrite it all anyway. So
yeah, so a little bit less of a shelf life makes it easier for us to actually give you the best possible information we can. So what do you say we get into it here?
Yeah, let's go.
Brooklyn at home hosting the Boston Celtics. This was some news that we actually got earlier in the day. And by the way, if you're wondering why we started late, a cursory glance at the schedule will always let you know. If it's a 7:30 Eastern time slate, less than 8 games, we're going to start an hour ahead of time, hour 15 ahead of time if it's 8 or more games. So that's based always on what time the slate starts. Today we get a different slate or start time, 7:30. It is Brooklyn and Boston, the only game to start at 7. Then you've got an 8, an 8:30, a 9, a 10, and a 10:30. So there isn't one time slot or time that actually has more than 1 game tipping off. Let's SJM Laffy shaved. He a new man. I did say. I mean, I kept it shorter this time. Once in a while we mix things up. I feel like a new man. I'm glad you noticed. Thanks for noticing, Steve. Appreciate that. All right, let's talk about Boston and Brooklyn. Celtics are now 2.5-point favorites. The Irving news definitely had some impact. And then Marcus Smart was doubtful, but then eventually ruled out with this illness. So now you have Terry Rozier. And the big thing here, Adam, is you could talk about fading chalk and getting over on the field, getting leverage. But in a spot like this, I'll be different elsewhere. I mean, how often are you getting someone that's close to minimum salary or sub 4K everywhere, going to get 30-plus minutes, has posted 30-plus fantasy points in every game Irving's missed this season? Marcus Smart is also out. I mean, at this rate, Rozier is a plug-and-play to me. He's a free square. And while it sucks that everyone's going to have him, I don't really feel like being the person that doesn't have him, trying to get over on the rest of the field when he's so cheap that it'd be so difficult for him not to pay off his price tag.
Right. I'm right there with you. And there's a couple of reasons for it. I'm all for trying to pivot away from highly owned plays, but it has to be guys that really can fail. And Rozier's price has come down so much that it's near impossible for him to actually fail on like a point per dollar basis here,
especially when you factor in fantasy point game.
Right. But when you factor in, you're right. Like when you factor in also what he allows you to get into your lineup by saving that money. So it's not like you can really pivot to someone like $1,000 more expensive and then be like, oh, Terry Rozier scored 20 points. My guy scored, 26, because you still just, spent an extra $1,000. There's no one really around Rozier that is anywhere close to comparable. it sucks, but it's just a spot where I think you kind of just have to play him and take the 15% of the field that take the free rake on the 15% of the field that don't.
Yeah, pretty much. Right now on our Awesemo.com ownership projections, we have him on DraftKings projected at a crisp 85%, which is still 15% lower probably than it should be, and 82% on FanDuel. It's just very difficult and really difficult for him not to give you what you need here. But Rozier isn't the only player here that makes sense. And doing the early bird podcast with Dan with Stratford last night, small forward was really brutal on FanDuel, and it's not like it's gotten a ton better. But if you look at someone like Gordon Hayward, he's played 6 games since the start of the new year, since the start of January. 2 have been really good, 4 have been garbage. Right, both of those good games where he had 100 total fantasy points on the button came with Irving sidelined. Irving was healthy in the other 4. Hayward had a total of 75 fantasy points. It's not a coincidence. And you look at the run that he's got with and without Irving this year. With Irving, 17% usage, 13% assist rate, 0.83 fantasy points per minute. Without Irving, in almost as much time, 453 minutes, 22% usage rate, 29% assist rate, 1.06 fantasy points per minute. And then take Marcus Smart off the court. That goes to 23% usage, 34% assist rate, 1.08 fantasy points per minute. I get it. And I don't like rostering Hayward in most spots, but a weak position, a good matchup with the Nets should be a competitive game. I'm having trouble getting away from Hayward just because these positions are rough, and his price is also pretty reasonable as well. Where are you at on Hayward? And then we'll talk about the rest of the wings and get to the front court.
I'm right there with you on Hayward. Yeah, right there with you on Hayward, because the big thing for me is, he sees an increase in usage without Kyrie, which is nice, but the increase in assist percentage without Kyrie on the floor just gives us a higher floor for Hayward. It gives us a higher ceiling as well. Smart being out means that I'm even more comfortable projecting him towards the upper end of his normal minutes range. I have him at 30 minutes here. I don't think it would be shocking if he plays a little bit more, but I just think that Kyrie out really matters for his production, and Smart being out just helps with the minutes. So it's tough for me not to like Hayward, especially on FanDuel where he's a small forward and you have to roster 2 of them in a really ugly position. It's just another spot where I expect he'll be popular, not like Rozier is, but he's just too cheap for his current role.
He is. And we had a question from Tremaine in chat. Said was Horford out for those 2 games that Hayward did well? He wasn't. His minutes were limited in the mid-20s, but you really think about it, it doesn't make a difference because I'm not just pulling his rates from those 2 games. These are on the season, Adam. And I know Marcus Morris was out for one of those, but I mean, Marcus Smart is out for this one. And Irving is really the big piece here. So regardless of who played in those games, and really it was just Morris out for the one, and Irving obviously for both. Hayward on, across a 500-minute sample here and almost 300 minutes without Irving and Smart has clearly been more efficient. But not only that, as you pointed out, his assist rate has been markedly higher. So yes, Horford being on a 30-minute limit from what we're seeing, I would basically say it's lifted at this point. Doesn't really concern me much when you're getting Hayward at that price. It doesn't make a big difference to me.
Right. And you mentioning that he had combined for 100 points, it wasn't even to really say like he's a good play for that reason. It was just pointing out that it happened.
Exactly.
The reason he's a good play is that the underlying rates and per minute production in this situation back it up.
Right. And his only 2 good games recently were with Irving out. And I say that because when Irving's healthy, Hayward really, when I say he takes a backseat role, I mean, he's virtually invisible. But I think Jaylen Brown's fine too. Honestly, do you expect him, if we got the starting lineup and I missed it, feel free to correct me here. But would you think he starts today?
Yeah, I'm expecting him to start. I have him pegged for 32 minutes. Yeah, so I'm expecting Rozier, Brown, Tatum, Morris, Horford to be the starting lineup.
Me too. And I like Brown, and I actually like Horford here. So I don't want to play 4 Celtics in the same lineup, but taking a combined almost 70 minutes out of the backcourt makes a pretty big difference.
I might play 4 in some FanDuel lineups because, for one, you can drop the worst one potentially, but 2, they're just really, really cheap there. Not just Rozier, but Hayward at 5,200, Morris at 5,100, Jaylen Brown at 4K. I'm okay getting 4 Celtics in the FanDuel lineups.
Right. Look, it's not the craziest thing you'll ever do because the biggest thing here, people always ask, like, how many players from a team, and you can add on to this, how many players from a team, I get this question all the time, is too much? There's no good answer to that because if you're playing, say, if you're playing 4 Wizards after John Wall went out and Markieff Morris went out on that first week, where Satoransky was 3,600, Jeff Green was 3,900, Brad Beal was 7,400, and Thomas Bryant was 3,900. 4 or 5 is reasonable. But if you're talking to me about a team where you're playing 4 players and all of them are above 7K and none of them are priced down, and there's really haven't been any injuries to free things up, well, then that's too much. But there's no clear-cut answer. It's all situational. And I think in a spot like this, you can get to more of them based on their salaries.
Right. It's all slate dependent. Obviously for one, the price tags on those guys, you have to take that into play. And also the rest of the slate. Like this is a slate that, if you just take the strategy show that Josh and I did this morning, for example, as we went through that show, there wasn't really a whole lot that we liked. And then, value obviously has opened up since, but so it's not like there's a lot of opportunity cost on this particular slate to having a lot of guys from one team. And I agree with you. It's very similar to me from the Washington example where on DraftKings in particular, everyone was like $1,000 too cheap. And I went ahead and I played 4 guys from the Wizards and I didn't feel great about it because I never do. But then I went back and looked at the end of the night and Osimo sitting there with like 5 Wizards and I think like every lineup I saw. So it's just one of those things where you can do it. If you make a blanket rule, it would be, don't play 4 guys from one team, but there are certainly exceptions. And I think that this is the kind of spot where you can make one when, especially on FanDuel, there's, just guys that are significantly underpriced.
Yep. No question. If it is Rozier, Brown, Morris, Tatum, and Horford, they've played a combined 6 minutes together as a 5-man unit this season. So that would be something different. But I don't think we've seen a game with Smart and Irving out. Maybe we did, but there were definitely a lot more moving parts, and there have been this whole season. But yeah, with Boston, you kind of just have to get there. And on FanDuel, it's a little bit easier to do so because of the restrictions. So I agree with you. And it's a tough spot to get away from them. I like all of them individually and a bunch of them together. And I think Horford's perfectly fine as well, Adam.
Yeah, I like him more on DraftKings where you can roster him at power forward. Yeah. But, he got up to 30 minutes last game. They said before the game that he could play 30 plus. So I don't even think that 30 minutes is a hard cap. But he also sees a boost in his assist percentage without Kyrie. He's played – I just lost it.
I have it.
He's played 188 minutes without Kyrie on the floor this season. 25.7% assist percentage, 20.5% usage rate, slightly over a fantasy point per minute. Obviously, a very appealing spot here against Brooklyn too. So I'm more interested in him on DraftKings than FanDuel because of the position and because there are guys that are just really, really underpriced on FanDuel that aren't as bad on DraftKings. But I think Horford's perfectly fine.
And it's a great matchup against this Brooklyn front court, no question. Yeah, he sees a 7.5% bump in assist rate with Irving off the floor for a center. That's a really nice number. So I think we've covered Boston as good as we can. If you guys have any questions, feel free to hit us up in chat. So Kevin Reed, Laffy rotating his head so everyone can see their AirPods, not gauges. No, that's not what I'm doing. I actually have a TV over here. Sometimes I look over to see what's going on. But yes, they're AirPods, not gauges. That was pretty funny, though. I'll give you that. Everyone thought I was a goth DFS guy. Who do you have for Brooklyn? Oh, sorry. I wanted to tell you, Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is out. Shabazz Napier is out as well.
Yeah, Napier out, kind of interesting. I'm assuming you just get more run for like Pinson, maybe? Like in addition to
to trade, baby. Woo!
Oh man, is it okay that I'm getting? Go ahead.
So I mean, I don't think it makes a huge difference. Maybe you just, I think you mostly end up seeing more minutes for guys that don't matter. The one guy that stands out from Brooklyn for me is D'Angelo Russell on DraftKings in particular. 6,500, obviously not a great spot against Boston, but Smart being out probably hurts their defense, their backcourt defense a little bit. On top of that, though, it's just the upside that Russell gives you is, through the roof, and a $6,500 price tag just takes away a lot of the risk that comes with him. So I think that price tag is really nice. I don't mind Dinwiddie at 5,500 on DraftKings either, but I prefer him on FanDuel at 5,700. It's still even there. It doesn't stand out like Russell does on DraftKings, but I would say that on FanDuel, my favorite guy from the Nets is Dinwiddie. On DraftKings, it's Russell.
For me, it's Russell. I'm sorry, you said on DraftKings it's Russell, Dinwiddie on FanDuel is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm with you. I thought you had it the other way around. I was going to say that's kind of strange. Yeah. Listen, Russell doesn't have a great spot. I do agree that Marcus Smart being out makes it better. But the biggest thing is, look, I know that Russell can have decreased minutes, and we've seen this recently. But I think we talked about it on Friday. Atkinson pulled him when he blew a defensive assignment earlier in that game against Atlanta, and then he kept him out for a decent stretch in the first quarter. So you lose minutes there. And then he lost minutes in a blowout to Toronto and Boston, where he was on pace to see over 30 minutes. So it doesn't concern me. 2.5 point spread. You're talking about a ball dominant guard at 6,500 who has a 30% usage rate and a 38% assist rate. I mean, these two numbers to me alone are enough to put him firmly in play. And despite a rough matchup, if he's out there getting shots up as the primary facilitator, 6,500 just simple is too cheap. It's way too inexpensive. Take your first bong hit, legalize. There you go. Too cheap. I also say though, if you're trying to go heavy stars and scrubs here, and I expect this to be pretty popular roster construction today, Ed Davis is one of those guys that he could go out there. I get that he's very volatile, but if he's getting the bulk or all of the backup center minutes, I'll mention why he didn't last game. You're getting 22, 24 minutes from him, and just look at against Atlanta: 8 rebounds, 16 assists. Sure, or 16 rebounds, 8 points. Not a great matchup again, but Ed Davis as a per minute guy is actually pretty solid. I think 1.1 fantasy points per minute. He's really cheap. Just as a dart throw in tournaments, I'd rather have him over a bunch of other guys. And Allen Williams played 9 straight minutes to close out that game against Toronto, but they were down by 28 points going into the fourth quarter. I don't expect that to be the case again. Do you have anybody else for Brooklyn you want to talk about?
I agree with you on the Ed Davis minutes. Not like that. I don't expect Allen Williams to actually be in the rotation here. I do think Napier being out too probably just helps to solidify minutes for Dinwiddie and for Russell. Yep. I went ahead and bumped Russell up to 34 minutes, Dinwiddie up to 30. I had them at 32 and 28. I think it just makes them, a little bit safer.
Absolutely, yeah. But because think of it this way: would you expect Dinwiddie and Russell to soak up a good amount of those minutes, or Theo Pinson to play, 25 minutes? I would go with the former.
But, yeah, I had Pinson at 8 minutes now. I just kind of quickly redid the rotation.
Yeah, and I mean, look, he played 28 minutes against Milwaukee, but don't be confused. Look at the dates. He didn't play for like 3 games after that, and then he got the run in those blowouts. So I agree. You got to tick those numbers up a little bit for Dinwiddie and Russell. Talking about Houston and Memphis here. Basically, there's nobody left on this Rockets roster. Nobody meaningful outside of James Harden. Capella's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Eric Gordon remains out. Chris Paul is out. I mean, it's a shit show right now. And Harden just keeps getting it done. But, man, let me just say something. James Harden, if I had told you last night, okay, I played a guy, I'm not going to tell you who. I play a guy at 12-7. He shot 1 for 17 from 3-point range. Or how about this? You're going to play Harden at 12-7, but in advance he's going to shoot 1 for 17 from 3. Do you play him?
Probably not, no.
Dude, he had 75 fantasy points. Like, that is one of the most outrageous things you'll ever see. A guy shoots 5% from 3 on 17 attempts and has 75 fantasy points. When I say you can't make it up, you really can't make that up. It's otherworldly shit right there.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously another difficult matchup for James Harden. It feels like despite how good he's been lately, he really hasn't had that many cake matchups during this stretch. No. And this is another tough one. It's a slow-paced game against a quality Memphis defense. He's on the second half of a back-to-back. I don't really care. DraftKings. So I will say that the same way I felt, I think the last time that Harden and Davis were on a slate together, I prefer Harden on DraftKings. I prefer Davis on FanDuel because the scoring is different. Davis is a little bit cheaper. Harden gets penalized more for his turnovers on FanDuel, doesn't get the 3-point bonus, doesn't get his double-double or triple-double bonus. Davis gets more points for blocks. I just think that Davis is a better play on FanDuel if you're only rostering one. That said, there's enough cheap value on the slate that it's pretty easy to get both of these guys in there. And with it being a 6-game slate, I think that that's a very reasonable approach. There's nothing that makes me not want to play Harden. I mean, Capella being out kind of scares me a little bit just because you really are down to zero talent on this team outside of James Harden now. But, again, he's going to play 38, 40, maybe more minutes. He's got a 46.2% usage rate without Capella, Paul, or Gordon on the floor. He's got a 52% assist percentage, 10.5% rebounding percentage, still averaging close to 1.8 points per minute. It's just, video game numbers from this guy right now. And the matchup isn't any worse than other ones he's seen. He's already had, I think, 2 good games against Memphis this year anyway.
So not just 2 good games against Memphis. And by the way, both of these have come with Chris Paul out. 2 triple doubles against Memphis. And he's averaging 38, 11, and 11.5 and 76 fantasy points against them in 2 games this year. I think both of them came over the last 3 weeks, Adam. So.
Yeah, I thought Paul was in for the first one.
Oh, was he?
I think so.
Okay. He's still triple-doubled.
More impressive, yeah.
Yeah, he's still triple-doubled. You're right. Chris Paul did play that. That might have been his last game. No, it wasn't. It was his – okay, he played that one and then 3 more. Okay, that makes sense. But, yeah, they all came within the last month, and Harden's just been ridiculous. Let me ask you, though, just to break up the monotony on the James Harden conversation, because it feels like it's the same every night. He did play 43 minutes yesterday on the road, and he's got a second leg of a back-to-back on the road after playing 43 minutes. Does that concern you at all?
I mean, a little bit, in that if there's ever a spot where I'm going to let the situation make me not want to roster Harden, it would be this one. If there are certainly times where people have come up with reasons that they don't like Harden, and I've just basically laughed at them. I think it's reasonable here to be like, okay, matchup's not great, 43 minutes last night. It could certainly go poorly. But again, it's James Harden. I'd still rather have him than not have him, especially on DraftKings.
And me too. Because guess what? He could still shoot 1 for 17 from 3 and give you 75 fantasy points.
Right. I'm not sure how much I'll end up with on FanDuel. I still have him, but
13-3 is a lot.
Right. And also shooting guard's a pretty nice position when you have Jaylen Brown at 4K, but then you have DeRozan and Donovan Mitchell, who obviously we'll talk about, amongst a handful of other guys that
even Lou Williams at 6,500 or 6,600 is a really solid price in the game with a 241 total.
Yep. Yeah, so it's just a deep position for a guy who I think, given FanDuel scoring, it's not that he's overpriced, it's that he is at a point where it's easy for him to disappoint you.
Where do you think Harden ranks in the MVP odds right now?
He has to be number 1, right?
Yeah, so he is now, but just 4 days ago, Giannis was still in the lead. Now, look, I know a lot of people still have Giannis winning the MVP. Okay, fine. I get it. But the fact that Harden has kept this team afloat with the supporting cast that you have, Daniel House, PJ Tucker, Austin Rivers, Gerald Green, Brandon Knight, it's rough. It's all been him. It was what? No, not 4 days ago. I think a week ago, but he was plus 550 and Giannis was plus 200. And if you got in on that, you're probably feeling pretty good about it. So, yeah, just throwing that out there. There's no way. They by the way, they blew Cleveland out the other day. Remember we talked about not worrying about a blowout here? He had 43, 10, and 12 with 2 blocks, 2 steals, and 88 fantasy points in 3 quarters.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. I looked and saw that he had 74 fantasy points with 2 or 3 minutes to go in the quarter. And I tweeted something that I had called it on our show. And then I looked back, 30 seconds later, and he's up to 86.
Yep. Finished with 88. I want to talk about the rest of this team, though, because Capella's out, but you're still talking about guys like Nene and Marcus Chris, who one of them is really old and hasn't played more than 20. He played 21 minutes once this season. The last time he played more than that, or even 20 minutes at all, was in 2017 in the postseason. So it's been a long time. And I just don't see him playing more than, say 21 minutes. And then I'd put Marquise Chris probably around the same. And I don't know, maybe Isaiah Hartenstein gets a couple extra minutes. He was recalled. Maybe he plays 8 minutes or so. But do you really see? I know people love when somebody goes out, they want to target value. But how much value, even at these dirt cheap prices, do you really get from this front court?
Yeah, I expect it to be a mess here. I have Nene projected for 20 minutes. I have Chris at 16. I have Hartenstein at 12.
Okay.
It could go
I
a
have
variety.
20, 20, and 8, but go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, it could go a variety of ways. Marquise Chris isn't very good. He could lose minutes to Hartenstein. The reason I don't think he does is that Hartenstein was in the G League and Chris has been taking Nene's minutes. So I think that, D'Antoni probably had him ahead of him for a reason. But, it could go a variety of different ways. It wouldn't be surprising if it's even a hot hand situation where one of them plays well and just gets more minutes. The point being, though, that outside of maybe, having some Chris or Hardenstein at power forward on FanDuel just to drop them, outside of that, I just don't really see a way to get them into my lineups.
Right. Yeah, and you're not going to play Nene at center on FanDuel.
Right.
So I don't see it. But I do see, God, you talk about a cupcake matchup. Who in the world is going to stop Gasol? The only one really that could stop Gasol is Marc Gasol, because I told you I read an interesting article on him from one of the Grizzlies writers talking about how there's no way he's not playing hurt right now with that ankle injury that bothered him. And then he was dealing with a hamstring injury and all this stuff. And his defense had actually taken a step back. But he looked pretty solid against San Antonio the other day. And he's in that weird price range, right? He's in that 7K range, that mid 7K range. But man, going up against the likes of Nene and Marquise Chris, who literally could not box out anybody that's really bad at basketball or would be bad at basketball, Marquise Chris could not box them out. And then Isaiah Hartenstein. It is on paper a really good spot for Marc Gasol, who should dominate. It's just he has not looked like himself lately.
Yeah, and also just the way that I think roster construction ends up going as far as, stars and scrubs, it gets tough to get into that mid-range. But whatever Gasol I get, I'm perfectly happy with. I think it is a very nice spot for him. I expect him to play 34 to 36 minutes here. So yeah, Marc Gasol is perfectly fine.
The one thing I would like more too is that if Marc Gasol was like a stellar rebounder, I still expect him to get his work on the boards, especially if Chris is out there. Chris is a terrible rebounder, but as a rebounder, Marc Gasol is average for a center. Just putting that out there. But no, like you said, if you get some Marc Gasol, it's still a really good spot. I expect him to have a good game. What do you have? Anything else from this one? Because Kyle Anderson's out and Dylan Brooks is also out. Hell, last night I was even considering Shelvin Mack.
I still am.
I knew it. I had a feeling.
Yeah, so I mean, this is another one where we're going to want to pay pretty close attention to how this rotation goes today, because we couldn't really pick much up from the second half of their last game. Justin Holiday got the start with started the second half with Kyle Anderson injured, but he only played like 6 or 8 minutes in that half. We saw more playing time for Shelvin Mack. We saw Javon Carter essentially retake over the backup point guard duties, and then Mack play a lot of his time alongside either Carter or Mike Conley. So
did you see the lineup? I'm sorry. Did you see the lineup that Bickerstaff closed with?
I saw it. I don't remember it. What was it? Gasol, Jackson. Jermichael Green at the 3.
Yeah. With Green, Jackson, and Gasol out there for a large stretch at the end of the game.
Right. So that can happen. I don't know that it will.
Right.
But there's a lot of different ways that this can go. And so taking a chance on some of these cheap guys in tournaments, whether it be Mack, whether it be Justin Holiday at a really cheap price tag, I'm fine with that. It's just that you have to keep in mind that there's a variety of ways that this rotation can pan out. Outside of those dirt cheap guys, I do think Jaren Jackson at 5,100 on DraftKings is a good play.
Yeah, I like that. He's super risky as always. That's kind of the daily disclaimer. But with Mack, the reason I said I was considering him last night is I would have had probably a lot more if the Irving news and Smart news didn't break in the direction that it did. I still think Mack is the most likely to get upwards of 28, 30 minutes, though. Like, if you're talking about probabilities that, him or Green or whoever sees the bulk of the additional run, I'd still say Mack. And Bickerstaff said that, Mack's going to be he called him the third string point guard. Reason I mentioned that is that you would expect Mack to get minutes at several different positions, which should also help. But Adam, that rotation, if you look at the flow of that, it was kind of a mess, especially given that they closed with Green, Jackson, and Gasol. So there's really no telling.
Yeah, there's no confidence in anything that I have to say from this Memphis rotation.
Agreed. So that's why I would say Shelvin Mack would be the one here. It's still tough though. Was surprised to see that closing lineup. If that is the case though, and Green does get additional minutes, well, people will obviously talk about him being a play, but it would solidify Jaren Jackson a little bit more too, assuming he stays out of foul trouble. You would expect his minutes to be, pretty firm above 30 minutes. Again, assuming he stays out of foul trouble.
Right. Also worth pointing out, and one reason I do like Jackson a little bit more today is that, talking about Capella being out, I think that this is a game where maybe Joakim Noah loses a few minutes and Jackson gets a couple of extra minutes at center. It's been kind of hard to predict how that goes, but this doesn't strike me as a matchup where Joakim Noah needs to play like 14 minutes in relief of Gasol.
Right. You want to move on to the next one here?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about San Antonio and Charlotte. Oh, God. So the Spurs are 8.5-point favorites. You got a 220 total. By the way, this total was at 223.5 earlier today. It's come down to 220. Seems a bit more realistic. I thought it was a bit high. We'll start with the Charlotte side of the ball. Been a lot of chatter about Tony Parker revenge. And I think compounding that and adding to the hype would be the fact that James Borrego rested him on Saturday, so he'd be close to 100% against San Antonio. Yes, the 18-year veteran coming back to San Antonio. People love the revenge narratives.
Yeah, they do. I'm not buying it. I think that, if you want to tell me that Parker plays towards the upper end of his minutes range and gets out there and plays, maybe 18, 20 minutes, then sure, I'm not going to tell you you're crazy. If you tell me that Tony Parker is going to play much better than normal because he's playing the Spurs, then, I don't really know what to tell you. So yeah, outside of the fact that he might end up in like 1 or 2 out of 150 lineups or something, I don't have interest in Tony Parker.
Yep. I know some people like the narrative. It's just, how do you project him? What are you going to do? Project. I think, as you said before the show, you can project him for some more minutes here, but are you really going to project him for more permanent production? I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah, you don't.
Right. Where else on the Hornets, if anywhere? Kemba Walker is 7,900 on DraftKings. It's the cheapest he's been since October 22nd.
Yeah, so Kemba, I think, is really interesting. I like the DraftKings price tag at 7,900 because, obviously we know what Kemba can do. We know the kind of ceiling he has, but I do think there's reason for concern as well. I had kind of come across just stuff talking about Cody Zeller as a screener and how good he is, and it would make sense for Kemba to drop off a bit without him out there because Kemba is one of the highest frequency pick and roll players in the NBA. If you go and look at him without Cody Zeller on the floor this season, he's averaged 1.1 DraftKings points per minute compared to about 1.25 alongside Zeller. His effective field goal percentage since Zeller's injury is at 41.5%, which is down from about 52.5% before the injury. And his assist percentage has gone down since the injury as well. He's gone from 10.7 potential assists per game to 8 potential assists per game. I think all of those things are concerning because it makes sense when you factor in Zeller, being a good complement to Kemba in the pick and roll. So I still think there's upside for him at that price tag. I still plan on rostering him. It's just, maybe there is actual legitimate reason to be concerned about his recent performances.
Yeah, I actually think so too. And I talked about him in today's article because when you get a price like that on someone like Kemba, you have to mention it. And look, this. Kemba earlier in the season was playing above his head. And he is and has always been a pretty low floor, high ceiling guy. And I say that for his price point, right? If you look at him since the start of January, he's averaging 20 points, 3 rebounds, or 3.7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 3.3 turnovers, and 30 fantasy points per game. It's kind of, his potential assists are down to 8 per game over that span. His usage is down. Couple things I do like though. Over this bad stretch, he's still driving to the rim 15 times per game almost. And his usage rate's 32%. So it's actually higher than his season average. So it's not like he's shooting less or anything like that. He's just been really bad and he's shooting poorly from behind the arc. But at the same time, I don't see there's any way, Adam, that I can prioritize him today. And that's kind of the bottom line here.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at as well, especially FanDuel. I think it's a lot tougher, 7,900 on DraftKings. But even there, you have guys priced around him that I think are really good plays.
Yep, I do too. What about the other side of this one with San Antonio? It's a Charlotte team over the last 30 days. They're 28th in defensive rating. They have just spiraled downwards. No, Cody Zeller hasn't helped them in the interior either. What are we doing with a Spurs team that is down Rudy Gay and down Marco Bellinelli?
I love the Spurs here. I think they're another team, not to the extent that Boston provides this value, but it's another team that I think, especially on FanDuel, like the entire team is just underpriced. Bellinelli being out doesn't seem like it would be a huge thing, but I think it gives you, 26 minutes from Patty Mills at a really cheap price tag. I like him a little bit more than I like Shelvin Mack because of the matchup here against Charlotte. Davis Bertans, I think, plays around 30 minutes. Not that you get a lot out of him, but it's just another sub 4K value play. And then you get into the, actual really good players on this team with DeMar DeRozan, who's still affordably priced. Without Rudy Gay on the floor, about a 30% usage rate, 29% assist percentage, should play 36 to 38 minutes as long as this game's competitive. LaMarcus Aldridge in a really nice spot against the Charlotte front court that, like you said, has just been really, really bad without Cody Zeller out there. And then Derek White's minutes are finally up. We had talked about him a couple of weeks ago that people were kind of point chasing because he was just playing 26 minutes a night, but shooting really well from the field and racking up steals and stuff like that. The minutes have changed now, though. So it's a completely different equation on White. I think you get around 34 minutes out of him here, and he's in a pretty nice spot. So really a lot of guys on San Antonio that I like.
Yeah, the minutes changing is a very big deal because now even if he only takes 8 shots, he's still out there for 32 plus minutes. It makes a big difference. What about, so let's take a little bit of time here to talk about DeMar DeRozan, because the shooting guard position has a lot of players here. We obviously have Harden. We have Mitchell, who you'll get to in a bit. His price has come up dramatically, though. You have DeRozan, Drew Holiday against the Clippers. Some red flags there. We'll talk about that. Lou Williams, D'Angelo Russell. It depends from site to site, but that's what we've got. Now, where do you prioritize? Where do you rank DeRozan among these guys? Not including Harden, of course, because he's not in the same tier.
Yeah. So I have FanDuel pricing in front of me right now, and it's Harden and Brown are like the only two guys that I have ahead of DeRozan at their respective price points.
Okay. Yeah, I like it too. And with Bellinelli out, obviously Bertans should see a little bit more run, but if this game is even remotely close, DeRozan's getting 35 plus minutes, and 35 plus minutes against the Hornets is just a really favorable spot. What about Aldridge at a power forward position that also has a bunch of players in that range?
Yeah, so I think that I have Aldridge a little bit behind DeRozan, but still is a really good play. Like at power forward on FanDuel, factoring in price, I have Davis number 1, Marcus Morris number 2, and then Aldridge number 3.
All right. Do you have interest in like a Bertans or anybody else that's in that bottom tier?
Yeah, I think Bertans plays around 30 minutes. I think Mills plays around 26. I think Forbes plays like 32. So, mixing those guys into some lineups in a pace-up spot against a questionable Charlotte defense, I think is, a perfectly fine strategy, especially because they should be much lower owned than the Boston guys. Not saying like just play Patty Mills over Terry Rozier, just saying like you can mix him in, and it's probably a way that you can kind of differentiate on top of, eating chalk with the Boston guys.
All right, let's talk about Utah and Detroit, unless there's anything else you want to get to in this one.
Now we can go to the Detroit game.
All right, let's do it. We've got 3 games to go on this 6-gamer. Live before lock, of course, coming up after us. They're going to bring you from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. That's when lock is today. You've got your boy Josh and Eddie on the Live Before Lock show, so don't go anywhere after this. Utah and Detroit. Utah 8-point favorites here, 208 total against the Pistons. I think we're going to have to spend some time on this Utah team because Royce O'Neal has found ways to stumble into some solid peripherals lately because he's playing 37 plus minutes a night. No Raul Neto, no Ricky Rubio, no Dante Exum. They're down a lot of players in that backcourt. So you've got him, whose prices come up to that high 4K range on FanDuel and DraftKings. You got Mitchell, who's 9,200 on DraftKings now, and 8,800 on FanDuel. Let's talk about the backcourt situation here first. And I'm going to mix O'Neal in as a shooting guard instead of small forward, just so we can flow this a little bit easier.
Yeah, so I'll start with O'Neal. I don't really have interest in him here, especially in tournaments. I just don't think he really has upside at his current price tag now that he's gotten up out of the minimum salary range. And on top of that, Grayson Allen is back, which at least adds some risk. You know, like I have O'Neal projected for 36 minutes here, but there's no reason to think that he can't play like 30 and Grayson Allen plays, 18 or 20 or something. So it just adds some risk in, whereas as before, it was kind of like they had no choice but to play Royce O'Neal. I just, even if I give him 36 minutes, though, I just don't really see the upside at this price tag. So not a priority for me. Obviously still interested in Donovan Mitchell. The salary has come up. I do prefer DeMar DeRozan where they're similarly priced. I just think that the matchup is better for DeRozan. I think the pace is better. And I think that they're very similar in terms of usage and assist percentage, even with everyone out for Utah. But still, a 33.5% usage rate, 36% assist percentage for Mitchell without any of those guards on the floor this season, and should play around 38 minutes here. So still, a very nice play. I think I have him a little bit behind DeRozan, especially if people are going to go to Mitchell at similar ownership.
So Mitchell's $700 more expensive than DeRozan on DraftKings. He's $100 less than DeRozan on FanDuel. There is a difference there for sure.
Yeah, definitely like the cheaper price tag on DeRozan on DraftKings. On FanDuel, I think it becomes more of an ownership question. I haven't looked at what our ownership has, our projected ownership has on that right now.
Right now, we have Mitchell at 19%. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have him like the 12th highest owned player right now. DeRozan at 21%. One player above him in terms of projected ownership. And then on DraftKings, we have DeRozan around 9th highest at 19%. And Donovan Mitchell, God, I got to scroll. Let me search him. Donovan Mitchell at 5% projected ownership.
Yeah, so on FanDuel where they're similar, I would rather have DeRozan. On DraftKings, I think it gets really close. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what the final update is because 5% just feels kind of low, but I guess on this slate, it is really tough to get there.
I DM'd you today. I think you were taking a nap, but I was like, I had mentioned there are what did I say? There's so many shooting guards in the same price range tonight. I say because it was so difficult to really make not an informed decision, but it's the decision where you feel comfortable with it, right? Like if you play one of these guys, as you just mentioned, the ownership's going to have to sway your decision one way or another, because otherwise, if you're just looking at it in a vacuum, it's going to be tough to make that decision.
Yeah, no question.
All right. What are your thoughts on Ingles? I liked him more before the news with Irving, because on FanDuel, it's a bad small forward position, but then, Hayward just becomes so appealing at that price that, at 1,100 less than Ingles, it makes me like him quite a bit more.
Yeah, and Ingles is just a guy that even with everyone out, he doesn't project as a great per minute player. He only played 30 minutes in their last game. I haven't projected for 33 here, but that game against the Lakers where he had 12 rebounds is kind of fluky. That's not what you really expect out of him, even under current situations. He's basically a 0.85 fantasy point per minute player, and it makes him just kind of a guy. Like he's okay. I don't hate it if I get there, but I'd rather, like you said, I'd rather play Hayward. I think I'd rather get to Gallinari for a little bit more.
I might even rather play Mirotic, honestly.
Yeah, it's just completely like neutral to me. I will say that I like Rudy Gobert here though.
Been playing like him a lot in this spot.
Yeah. Monster minutes, played almost 40 minutes last game. I have him projected for like 36 or 37, but it's just a spot here against this big Detroit front court where I, expect plenty of minutes again. He's got about a 22.5% rebounding percentage. He's averaging 1.22 DraftKings points per minute over the last, month plus. It's just I think a spot where Gobert could have plenty of success.
Yep, I agree. The only difference is, how closely priced to Yusuf Nurkic is he? And we'll talk about that in just a minute. By the way, Nene starting for Capella as expected. He's expected to play 18 to 20 minutes. So that's exactly where I had him here. And I think this is probably going to make a lot of people realize that it's just not worth it, had they not already realized it or been listening to the deeper dive, because we could have told you that. So you talked about Gobert. I like that. I think Favors is an interesting tournament option, but definitely not a priority. Just somebody that recently 26, 28 minutes over his last two games. If Favors plays 28 minutes against a bigger front court for Detroit, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get up actually close to 30 minutes here. And you don't really see him talked about that often. Anything else for Utah before we move on to the other side of this game?
No, I'm with you on Favors. I think that him getting 28 minutes in this matchup is certainly reasonable.
Do you have anything for Detroit?
No.
I don't either. And is there anything you want to talk about here?
No, I mean, no. Everyone knows Blake Griffin's good. Everyone knows Andre Drummond's good. There's nothing about the matchup or their price points that make me want to roster them. So that just comes down to if you want to roster them at low ownership, go for it. But they're nowhere near priorities for me at all.
Right. Both of their positions have players closely priced or just better priced than them. And I'm not getting there. I just can't get there. Plus, Utah defensively has looked a lot better recently, too. You put Gobert on the court for 38 minutes, it doesn't exactly help. All right, Sacramento and Portland. The last time these teams faced each other, Yusuf Nurkic in overtime, but still doesn't really matter if it was triple overtime. It wasn't, but this was ridiculous what he did. 24 points, 23 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 blocks, 5 steals, 83 DraftKings points. Just one of the most ridiculous games you'll see from any player this season, given what he did across the entire box score. And I'm not expecting 88 or 83 fantasy points from Nurkic. Don't get it twisted. What I am saying, this is a really good spot. And I was on him heavily against Sacramento the last time. I'm going to go back to the well here again. No team allows more rebounds to the position than Sacramento, and it's by a wide margin. Only one team allows more blocks to the center position than Sacramento. They have the highest or third highest field goal percentage allowed to the position. They struggle to protect the rim. I mean, all in all, this is a rough team. Oh, and they allow the 5th most points in the paint, the 2nd most second chance points, or 6th most second chance points, and the 4th highest field goal percentage at the rim. All of these numbers for Yusuf Nurkic line up for him to have those huge games like we saw, even if it's not 80 fantasy points. It's just such a phenomenal spot. I know they're on a back-to-back, but he played 25 minutes, plagued by fouls yesterday. I'm not worried about it. I really like Nurkic today. What are you doing with Portland? You can feel free to start wherever you would like, Adam.
Well, I mean, I love the matchup for Nurkic. The issue I'm having is just his price tag. It's a little high, like for this slate, I think. So a lot will come down to if I end up
on FanDuel or DraftKings or both.
Both, more so on FanDuel, but
okay. Because the reason I say it, he's only $200 more than Gobert on DraftKings. I get Gobert's been playing big minutes, but on FanDuel, he's $800 or $700 more. It's a pretty big price difference there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, comparing the price to Gobert, I think is a really good point. It's just like, so if I'm going Harden and Davis in lineups, it'll be tough, I think, to get the Nurkic.
Oh, no question. This is
right.
Sorry, go ahead. But of course, if you're playing those two, good luck getting to him or Gobert at that rate.
Right. Where maybe on FanDuel where I have fewer Harden plus Davis lineups, then Nurkic, I guess, becomes a little bit easier to get to. I love the spot. I think projecting him for 31 or 32 minutes is probably where you should be. If you go back and look at recent games, there are some games where he only plays, 25 minutes, but in all of his games recently where he has not been in foul trouble and the game has been competitive, we're still seeing, 30, 31, 32 minutes, and it's a big Sacramento front court. So I think the minutes should be there for Nurkic. I like him a lot. I like the matchup. Just kind of interested to see how much of him I actually end up getting in lineups once I make them. For Dame, I think obviously a really good play. Sub 9K on DraftKings going into a huge pace up spot against Sacramento. He hasn't been great lately, only averaging about 1.13 fantasy points per minute over the last month. But, still it's Dame Lillard. He should have close to a 30% usage rate. So whatever Lillard I get, I'm happy with. Beyond that, just kind of secondary plays for me from Portland. Evan Turner, if Harkless is out, I think is okay. Not a priority, but should play around 26 minutes in a really favorable spot. Aminu, kind of the same thing. Not a priority, but it's a really nice spot for him.
Yep, it is. I wish Aminu was a little bit cheaper. I feel like that price point's a little prohibitive, but still, it's not impossible to get to him. And if you're playing Davis Harden lineups, you're going to have to make some of those decisions. On the other side, I really don't mind Lillard here, but this is, of course, if you're not playing the Harden Davis. The problem with, and I don't want to take too much time on this, but God, with Harden Davis lineups, you're going to see a lot of dupes out there.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, and that's what. Yeah, the fact that like the San Antonio guys and there are some cheap Memphis guys that you can like rotate through, I think helps a little bit in that regard, but. It'll certainly be very similar roster construction. Yeah.
I mean, the overlap is going to be pretty wild. What do you have for Sacramento?
It's kind of a mess right now with everyone healthy. You're seeing like Yogi Ferrell still staying in the rotation, doesn't help anything. So it kind of just makes a lot of secondary options where, like, if you get the Aaron Fox or Cauley Stein, I think that they're perfectly fine plays, but they're not priorities for me. The one spot I do think is kind of interesting is $4,800 Marvin Bagley on DraftKings. He played 25 minutes last game. Before his injury, we were pretty routinely seeing 26 to 28 minutes out of him.
He closed as well.
Yeah. Bielitsa only played about 17 minutes last game, so it seems like they're going to go back to what they were doing before Bagley's injury. I think that jumping on Marvin Bagley before his price tag rises again is a pretty interesting strategy in tournaments here.
Me too. He's actually the only king I wrote up today.
Yeah. And also, Harry Giles is a $3,500 punt at power forward on FanDuel. I like.
There you go. Yeah. The only thing I don't like is, so De'Aaron Fox the other day, when interviewed, was talking about, because this has been a big thing, the whole disconnect between Yeager and the front office when it comes to Bagley and such. And Fox had said, well, when I get the ball, my first look is to drive to the rim and get a layup and to score. And if it's not there, I obviously will kick it out. He said with Bielitsa, he spreads the court and he gives you another shooter, out of the perimeter when he needs, when the defense gives help, and then you can kick it out to Bielitsa. Well, apparently Bagley doesn't space the court like they're looking for, and he kind of shed light on why he's been starting and why Bagley hasn't. But Bagley did close that game out over Bielitsa. So if that continues, right, and it's a close game, and Bagley gets 25, 27 minutes, then at 4,800, you're in a really good spot. The thing is, right now, it's all speculation.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down to. All right, let's get to the last game here. Save the best for last. The Clippers and the Pelicans. And by the way, if you hear us talking about our articles and the projections and the ownership and all of that good stuff, you can check all of it out at awesemo.com, AWESEMO.com. And right now, if you go to the homepage, click the Join Now, select your plan, and use the coupon code Deeper Dive, all one word. That's me and Adam, Deeper Dive, our show. You get 50% off your first month. So it's a great deal, a great opportunity to check us out at a discount. Deeper Dive, one word, click it, plug it in as the coupon code, and get 50% off the first month. Hopefully we'll see you over there. Clippers, 2.5 point favorites, 240 total, Adam. Let's get into it. I'll toss it over to you because there's a lot to get to here.
Yeah, this is obviously the most appealing game from a fantasy standpoint, ignoring value from Boston. Just two fast-paced teams, two struggling, or teams that aren't very good defensively. Anthony Davis, I absolutely love, especially, again, on FanDuel, where I think the scoring favors him as opposed to Harden. But even on DraftKings, I think he's a really, really good play there. You have the multi-position eligibility, which is nice. Drew Holiday, you mentioned earlier kind of some red flags with him, and I am a little concerned by Elfrid Payton being back. I think that it just takes the ball out of his hands a bit. He's still playing huge minutes though, and the price tag's reasonable in this spot. So I don't dislike him. I just don't really love him here. I love Davis. I like Randall. I like Payton. I like Nico. Davis certainly the priority for me from this side though. Yeah,
no question. Randall played 34 minutes when Mirotic returned, and 13 of them were with Mirotic, and then 14 of them were with Davis off the floor. But he also closed out, I think he closed out with Mirotic and Davis. Yes, they did. So when all of them are on the court, it obviously isn't good for Randall, but the large majority of his minutes are coming with one of them off the floor. So I still think it's 7,400 on DraftKings. That's a really good play. I have no problem with Randall. And I think Nico, especially at a weak power, small forward position on FanDuel, is perfectly fine. I mean, he's a +1 per minute guy, 1.13 with Randall on, 1.01 with Davis on this year. Most of his minutes, again, are going to come with one of them off the court. So, yes, they're all healthy. But if Mirotic gives you 28, 29 minutes in a really up-tempo spot where he should thrive from beyond the arc, I like him as well. I just worry about Holiday in terms of losing facilitating work, and I think he's going to continuously fall in that 35, 40 fantasy point range, which I don't know if that'll be enough today. Let's talk about the Clippers, and then we'll get out of here. Adam, I'll let you close it out. I will just say first that Lou Williams on FanDuel, I think, is still very much in play here at that price point. Yeah, I think Williams is underpriced on FanDuel as well. I think that he's a perfectly fine shooting guard option. He's fine on DraftKings too, I think. Yeah, just way better on because D'Angelo Russell is cheap on DraftKings and he's not on FanDuel. Right.
Where I think it gets really interesting here is Montrezl Harrell. Like he played 33 minutes last game. We had seen his minutes down, not too long ago, and we were seeing Gortat play more minutes. But in the last game against Detroit, which is a big team, Gortat only played about 14, 15 minutes. Harrell played over 30. I think that this is a matchup that he can absolutely smash if he gets around 30 minutes. Power forward eligible on FanDuel, which is really nice. So I like Harrell. I have some interest in Gallinari and Harris. I prefer Gallinari, especially on FanDuel where he's a small forward. But really just kind of a cheap Clippers team when normally this season they've been kind of correctly priced. I think they're actually mostly all underpriced today.
So do I. And I agree that with Harrell, there's still upside. He's played 30-plus minutes in 2 of his last 3. In an up-tempo spot like this, I expect him to get plenty of work. All right. Want to close it out? Call it a day?
Yep.
All right. Hey, we appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, wish you good luck tonight. And if you appreciate our content, if you want to see more and you like what we do here on the Deeper Dive, please hit us with the thumbs up, like the video. It helps us out quite a bit. And subscribe, hit that notification bell so you always know when we're dropping new content. We'll see you back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Stick around. Live Before Lock with Eddie and Josh coming up next.